We live in a brave new world of drones, and we have for a while now, with private and public drone operators proliferating for well over 10 years now. Indeed, even before then, with the radio-controlled model aircraft, and even military drone aircraft dating back to before 1991. Drones are nothing new. What has changed is there are a lot more of them these days. As well, there should be, because a bird's eye view of something is useful in real estate, film, law enforcement, military, you name it, and drones find their places. But it would be hard to ignore that people can still see unusual patterns, such as upticks in drone activity, as happened recently in New Jersey and other places globally. What's behind that remains a matter of speculation, which is what I did with today's guest. But fundamentally, one thought occurs to me through all of this. This may be the last of the drone flaps. It may actually become nearly impossible in coming years to even be aware that there is an uptick in drone activity just by judging from what you see in the skies. The reason is simple. With major companies looking to do deliveries with drones, to the continued proliferation of drones in industry and hobbyists, and their usefulness to emergency services and any number of other uses, there will in coming years be so many drones flying that the huge numbers of them will be normal, and what people will notice instead is when they aren't flying for whatever reason. Food for thought.
You have fallen into a special episode of Event Horizon with John Michael Goddard. John is joined today by Dan Magy for a discussion about the recent drone incidents in New Jersey and the United Kingdom. Dan Magy is the co-founder and CEO of Firestorm, a San Diego-based startup focused on developing autonomous, low-cost drones for combat and ISR applications. Firestorm's UAVs, including the Tempest and El Niño, are produced using distributed additive manufacturing, allowing for rapid and cost-effective production compared to traditional methods. He studied at the London School of Economics and UCLA.
Dan Magy, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me, John. It's nice to be here.
Now, Dan, we have a very strange situation going on that if you believe the executive branch isn't really seemingly happening, and then if you believe the military, it is. And it is the drone flap over New Jersey, the UK, other places. People are seeing them everywhere. The skies are seemingly filled with drones, which is something your company might well be able to accomplish. What is your thoughts on the current drone flap? Is this even something to be concerned about?
Yeah, I'm not concerned. I'll tell you what I think probably happened. My guess is that the government did do some testing with some different drones. They do that often, right? They probably did that testing at night. And then I think things have just snowballed, right? A lot of the videos I'm seeing are clearly either like off-the-shelf drones or aircraft or helicopters, but I think we're in a little bit of a mass hysteria moment, if you will. And a lot of that kind of comes from the fact that many of these videos, they have the drone lights up to FAA standards, which just means like it could be people messing with other folks. It could be people flying it in their backyard. But yeah, that's kind of where I'm at now after a couple of weeks of this.
It's been going on for a long time, and people are saying, sometimes these drones are hovering for a very, very long time, and some of them have been described as very, very large, like the size of an SUV.
Yeah.
Does that tell you that there's something wrong here and that might not be so easily done with technology?
Yeah, I mean, the people who are building the best drones in the whole world right now are all in Eastern Europe fighting in Ukraine and in Russia, right? A lot of the larger scale, basically ag platforms that have been modified for war, they fly for 45 minutes, maybe up to an hour and a half, 2 hours. There's some people trying to do some hybrid stuff, but they're really loud, okay? And they take a lot of power to move and to stay airborne for any considerable amount of time.
So it's not likely to have the situation is being described in some of the more extreme cases. But what about small drones? Now, the one thing about it that sort of bothers me is that I see drones all the time. My local police department loves them.
Totally.
So you see them everywhere. And that's not going to slow down. We're just going to see more and more
Yep.
drones. And I'm having trouble myself with my own scientific skepticism. It's saying is that, well, how do you know this is any different than a normal night if you're in an area that's heavy on drones,
Yeah.
with operators everywhere? How do you tell? How do you know that you're in a drone flap these days?
Yeah, I mean, look, you've hit the nail on the head in two different ways. First is that the FAA made a mistake about, I don't know, a decade or 15 years ago when drones were first hitting the market. A drone that you can buy at Best Buy or Walmart or on Amazon, it's classified the same as an aircraft. Okay? And so the laws have not adjusted appropriately, in my opinion, to allow for like a distinguishing on the size of vehicles. Because right now, like if say you went into your backyard and you took a gun out and you shot the drone down, and I do not recommend people do that, by the way, right? But you would be committing a felony because you would be attacking an aircraft. All right. There's absolutely a distinguishment that should be made between large scale commercial aircraft, industrial grade drones, and then the hobbyist craft. And yet the laws have not caught up to that, right? The second thing you talked about is police using your drones. So there is a category now in the world I live in called drone first responder, DFR. And I think it was actually like 2 or 3 weeks ago, one of the leaders of this category was just acquired by a big public safety company for $400 million. And so as police departments have trouble filling the gaps that they have in the recruitment side of things, they're going to continue to like use drone first responder. So we are going to see more drones, right? You're also going to see, because these waivers have finally been passed, you're going to start seeing drone delivery like Amazon, UPS, FedEx. All these folks are going to have drone delivery systems. So like we should expect to see a lot more drones. I think my take on this, having built and sold a counter UAS company and now building a drone company, is that I don't think the normal public quite understands how much we need to improve our laws so that we have a better understanding of, one, what is in the air, and two, what rights you should have to be able to protect or not protect what is flying above you.
Yeah, laws always lag, though.
Of course.
That's an ever-present problem, and they're responses. They're not actually proactive usually. And in the case of the drones, that's somewhat a problem because of the proliferation is so outstripped government.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that everybody says, well, the government must know what these drones are. If indeed there is a flap, they must know. Well, maybe they don't, and that it's just too much to track individual drone operators and things like that. But let me ask you this. If the government wanted to down those drones, say the FAA said enough, what sort of measures can they take to take them down?
Yeah, there's a variety of kind of ways in which we do this. The company that I started called Citadel, we use radio frequency jamming, and we could do it either in a precise or in a blanket manner. All right. Other options are drones with nets that catch other drones. But what we're seeing on the battlefield of Ukraine, where Russia and Ukraine are moving around the frequencies in which these drones operate in, or even using fiber optic cable to fly drones many kilometers/miles, is they're turning to kinetic solutions. So shooting them down, running drones into other drones like kamikaze. I mean, those are kind of the three big areas, right? It's basically digital or radio frequency jamming and interdiction. It's catching them with nets, or it's attacking them either with weapons or with other drones, which is very popular, like I said, out east right now.
Now, the Ukraine war is unique because it has in large part been a drone war.
Yep.
A constant flow of drones coming in, streaming in from all over the world. Actually, as I recall, one of the first ones was Turkish that was sent to the Ukrainians.
Yep.
And that shows that the current state of warfare is the drones. Do you think that in the West, Western militaries, NATO, we are behind?
Oh, we're so far behind. So 4 days ago, the Ukrainian government announced that they had built and given to the army 1.2 million drones this year. And that between when that was published and the end of the year, so in a 2 week period, the army was going to take another 120,000 drones. So a lot of these are FPV drones, right? They're really cheap. They have cheap components, cheap cameras, and they carry warheads, right? Others do surveillance. Some of them are, we'll call it more exquisite systems. But so when Ukraine was facing whatever it is now, 5 or 6 times the number of folks in the Russian armed forces, they really started to look towards technology. And Ukraine has an incredible education system and hundreds of thousands of electrical engineers. They started basically saying, look, we have all these kind of warheads that are sitting around that we can't use. What if we started building flying IEDs? That's the way I like to explain it to people. Everyone remembers the IED problems the US had fighting Al-Qaeda and ISIS in Iraq, right? This is the next evolution of it. I call them flying IEDs, and people because that's something they can relate to. What the West really needs to do is aggressively expand its industrial base. It needs to look to small companies, not the large defense contractors, to flex its manufacturing muscle. And it needs to be willing to take some risks if it wants to reach parity with some of the technologies that Iran, Russia, and China are currently building.
Now let's talk about Firestorm, because that is one of the things that really caught my eye was your ability to basically make a shipping container into a factory, to 3D print out drones and do it so fast that it's overwhelming. Tell us about that plan.
Yeah, I mean, it really came out of the idea for the kind of containerized manufacturing solution that we call the XL came out of a number of conversations where we were talking to special forces groups around the world where they were waiting for American suppliers from some of the big defense primes to give them the systems they needed to use. And they're waiting months, so massive back orders. Our thought was, let's basically deploy this, what I like to call the holy trinity of manufacturing. It's industrial grade 3D printing. It's an open source hardware and software approach so that you can modify the drone and put different payloads on it, right? And it's kind of a multi-use design slash schematic that allows you to either put like a jet engine, an electric engine, or a propeller engine all on the same drone. So our vision is you could have the means of production set up anywhere kind of in a day. And then all of a sudden you can start printing and building the stuff you need to stay in the fight. Because what the future of warfare looks like, in our opinion, is it looks like things need to be mass produced. Things need to be modified as the fight changes, because we're not fighting guys who are living in caves anymore. And it needs to be able to be basically networked together. So you could have multiple drones working together to go solve problems.
So Dan, my usual space is astrophysics, and I host predominantly a science show here. And numerous people, obviously, in the comment section on YouTube and other places are saying, hey, you got to talk about the drone flap, what's going on in New Jersey. What more information is that? Could you deploy with your system in full production? Could you deploy an anti-drone system should a drone attack look like this? Say a nation state is launching some sort of espionage mission or something like that. What could your drones do against it?
Well, we could put a variety of payloads onto our drone, and it's something we're actively working with and talking about with some of our current customers, right? I don't think there's like a one size fits all silver bullet to solve, let's call it a nation state mass produced wave of drones. I think you're going to need to have a couple different things. And it's going back to the kinetic and the non-kinetic solutions I talked about earlier. That's what you're going to want to deploy. And I think you are thinking along the right lines, John. You do, like, for some of these things, you're going to want to be airborne. And that's definitely something we could provide support with.
Now, Dan, as a sort of off the wall question, I was looking at your drones, the two models that you have on the website, and I'm thinking to myself, if you've got a platform like that is so interchangeable. You can almost do anything with it. What about a customer like NASA? What if they came and said, Firestorm, we want a bunch of surveillance drones for our rockets. We want to get a bunch of great camera angles that really fire people's imagination about going to Mars, or say SpaceX or somebody like that did it. Could you accommodate?
Yeah, absolutely. We think that like our vision is we want to build kind of a test bed type product where you could put a variety of payloads on it. And so putting ultra high definition cameras on things for folks like NASA, NOAA, and then some private companies that actually need that as well are active conversations that are being had.
So what does this look like? So say a private company is like, well, we need this drone looks really good for whatever purpose we have. Just insert purpose here. And how fast could you produce one? How quickly can you make a functional drone, print out all the parts and put it together at maximum capacity, whatever that may be, if there is a maximum.
Yeah.
And how fast could you get the drone out to the customer? And what's it cost? What's it cost?
I think the cost depends on like what accoutrements you want to put on it, right? Like a more expensive camera will make the drone cost more than like our normal build out, if you will. But we like to say anywhere in the 50 to 100K size for a big Group 2 drone. That's what the cost is. And then today we're literally printing stuff and assembling like a fully built drone in less than 2 days, right? And that timeline's only going to continue to drop. So a 4 hour assembly shift is how long it takes for us to actually put the drone together once it comes out of the printer, which is lightning fast for something that is 6 feet by 6 feet.
What do your 3D printers look like? I imagine you've got the best. What's that like?
Yeah, my co-founder is kind of one of the foremost experts in additive manufacturing, and we have a relationship with a large OEM. We're working to kind of solidify it in a more formal setting here right now. But yeah, a print line for us costs anywhere from $1 to kind of $2.5 million, but it allows you to build incredible industrial grade products. And I think that's one thing that folks probably like me and you, 10 years ago, we all got the desktop printer and we were making Yodas or Death Stars. That's at least what I'd make in mine, right? We've come a long way in 3D printing. And now a lot of the printers are used for medical equipment, right? They're used to fix parts on boats and airplanes. It's incredible how far this technology's come. And I think it's done it really quietly over the last decade. I think people kind of like wrote it off when they bought their home 3D printer and it couldn't do everything. And a variety of printing like processes have popped up and been refined and are now being used to build stuff that we find in our home every day. But it's just not trumpeted from the walls like it used to be 10 years ago that 3D printers were going to save the world.
I wondered about that because when I first saw, a decade ago, actually more than that, with the 3D printer craze where they were just becoming accessible to everybody, if you want one, I was looking at it and I was telling myself, I'm like, this is not a novelty. This is going to continue. This technology is going to continue to be developed. But everybody shut up about it. And now it's everywhere, but nobody really knows that. I mean, when you buy something, do you realize it's 3D printed? I see the same disparity, and I don't understand why that happened. But it's amazing. You're right. It's absolutely amazing. And it's the future of manufacturing, as far as I can tell. Is that an accurate statement that, at some point, the majority of manufacturing of goods will be 3D printing?
Yeah, I mean, it's incredible, right? Like, I think in our minds, when we think of manufacturing still, because of all the historical images and movies and TV shows we've seen, it's that Detroit manufacturing line where it's big, tough guys in overalls welding stuff together. I mean, that world really hasn't existed for 20 years. And what surprises most of our customers in the government when they come and see our fixed line and our mobile lines on the manufacturing side is how quiet everything is. Do you know what I mean? Like, again, we're thinking, oh, you're building drones. This should be loud. There should be a lot of people kind of running around and big, strong guys lifting heavy stuff. It's quiet. It's simple. The only thing you might hear is just the music the engineering techs are playing in the background as they assemble the stuff.
Yeah, and how quiet are the drones themselves? In other words, we spend a lot of time in aerospace trying to make, actually, look at submarines, undersea, where you have to keep that thing as quiet as you possibly can. Can we do that with drones? Do you see a day where you'll see a drone fly over but not really hear it? I know that probably the quadcopters are pretty quiet, but some of the big major government drones, that we know of, they're jets. They have jet engines.
Great question. I look, I think it depends on the use case. So there are some engines that we've tested that are like unbelievably quiet, right? A lot of those are electric, and there's some very interesting, well, I don't know what I want to call it, investments being made to kind of decrease the decibel level. For us, we use micro turbines, so it's like a mini jet engine. It sounds like a jet engine. We use like propellers, and then we also are building and gonna like start showing electric variants of our drone. So part of the noise is a function of what height you're at from the person who's listening, right? And then the second part of it is like the propulsion type that you're deploying. So if you're at 5,000 feet in the air, you might not hear anything, or you might just hear like a low whine. But if you're 200, 300 feet off the deck, it could sound like the end of days. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but I can certainly see an enormous value in being able to linger over a battlefield
Totally.
very quietly.
Totally.
And there's very obvious utility in something like that. But even if you're, again, back to science, even if you're just watching wildlife flying over a herd of elephants, you want to be quiet.
Yeah.
So you get
Totally.
you get your camera, but they're not running, they're just ignoring it. My next question for you, though, goes back again to the New Jersey flap and other places. So on the one hand, do you think maybe people's thinking about drones themselves is a little bit lagging, just like with 3D printing? In other words, yeah, okay, we're seeing a bunch of drones, but if you ever seen a display of thousands of drones making a light show, not everybody's seen that. And if you have, you're like, oh, wow. But do you think that that's lagging behind, and that this almost in some ways, and I don't want to demean it, because if somebody tells me they saw a drone, I'm inclined to believe them because drones exist. But the thing is that, do you think that people's thinking is sort of, this looks like a drone flap as though it might have looked a decade ago, is what I'm saying.
I think there's a very real chance for some of that stuff. Absolutely. And again, I also think that the lights that are required to be on a drone can be the same as small aircraft and helicopters. So you don't want to demean people and say you didn't see a drone. But I also think there are a lot of things in the air, right? And I think it can be hard to pick out what is what at times, if you know what I mean.
And you have the hoax problem. And when it gets out there and people are saying, well, we're seeing weird drones. Well, that's the perfect time to fly a weird drone if you got one.
I completely agree. We all went to high school with that one kid who would be in the back of the class causing problems, right? Well, there's what, 350 million Americans? There's a couple of those folks out there who are probably trolling folks now with their drones.
In other words, it may have, if it started out as a misinterpretation of normal drone traffic, it may not be now. It may be abnormal traffic because people are like, this is the time to fly the drone.
You nailed it. And that's like my thesis is there were probably some tests, okay? And then it's been a combination of people being trolls and then folks not kind of being able to properly distinguish between a drone and some other aircraft. That's kind of where we are. And I don't think there's some people who have some pretty aggressive takes on there. Like, I don't know if you saw this guy who's saying they're searching for a loose nuclear weapon, right? I think we're getting to the point now with some of the stuff on social media where it just is almost like self-perpetuating some of the hysteria around this.
Yeah, I found that a little bit odd that it came up that they were looking for an escaped nuclear weapon from the 90s. That seems strange.
Yeah, a briefcase nuke from Ukraine was here.
Yeah, well, but if that thing's from the 1990s, it probably doesn't work anymore. The fall of the Soviet Union, there was that fear.
So I actually called somebody. Well, we work with some pretty interesting people from some pretty elite units. Okay, I called a couple folks and just asked what would actually happen, and the response is like, let me, like, the baseline of this, because we can't give it all away, is If there was a loose nuclear weapon, you would not be looking for it only at night. Do you know what I mean? Like there is a massive process to go find something like that. So, yeah, we don't want to create more hysteria. That's the thing. You need to be able to respect what people are seeing. You need to investigate this stuff. We did talk about some of the laws that need to be improved as well, but we also need to be, not irresponsible in some of the comments we make.
Very important, especially when you may be dealing with something that's being misinterpreted, which I have a sneaking suspicion that's what this is, and that it just got out of hand. What do you think the government could do better in handling this situation?
I think they need to clearly communicate, right? If they were doing a test with maybe a swarm of drones a couple weeks ago, right? Admit that and then talk about some of the testing that was happening and, be a little mea culpa. I do know the government tests drones fairly often. That's their job, and we want them to do that, right? But let's communicate before something gets completely out of control, like this seems to be right now.
So what's the future for Firestorm? You've got the two models, but you've hinted that there are others that you're looking at. Where's it go from here as far as development of new models and with new capabilities?
Yeah, we actually have two additional drones under development right now. And we're also talking with other people who make drones to potentially kind of simplify or customize some designs that we could be making out of our Excel. We really want to build a system that allows for multi-mission, or we want to build a system that allows you to deploy multiple drones on multiple missions that work together. So the next year is about continuing our path of open source integration onto our platform, and then starting to develop with partners some of the software that allows you to reduce the cognitive load of the operator so you don't need 5 or 10 people running a drone. Our vision is one person on a laptop or on a tablet should be able to run multiple drones, and we're already doing a bunch of that from one ground system. That's really the key thing here, right? We want to bring the technology to a point where someone who's not an expert can run multiple drones simultaneously with ease.
Artificial intelligence and machine learning and how that relates to drones. In the future, will you even need an operator?
Yeah, that's where we need to be going. Our adversaries are going there. My thought is that we're in the first inning of that ball game. I think it will probably take a little bit longer to get there than we're giving credit for. Matching images is fine. That's just basic machine learning, right? Oh, I see a boat. I want to go see what that boat's doing. Or, oh, I see this antenna. I want to go figure out what the rest of it's attached to. Basically, building the platform that can sustain that, and then the compute required to then tell the platform to do what it needs to do. I think we're still in very early days for that stuff.
So machine first responders, we were talking about drones and police departments, but I can see all sorts of emergency services used for this, and firefighting, looking for missing persons in a national park, things like that. So can your drones be deployed that way? I mean, can you just immediately say, well, we need an infrared camera that can look for the heat signature of a human so that we can go look for them in the national forest? They're lost. We have no idea where they are, but maybe we can see them better with a drone than we can from eyes in a helicopter. How fast can you deploy that? I mean, how fast can you customize and deploy one of your drones for a search and rescue mission like that?
Yeah, John. I mean, we're integrating new cameras in days on our platform. So we'll have basically, say someone says we need to go do search and rescue, right? And search and rescue is incredibly labor intensive and it's incredibly costly, right? Some of these searches can cost in the tens of millions of dollars. What we're saying is, to your point, throw the infrared camera on there and let's get a bunch of drones in the air and have them start working through a pattern to identify what could then be, to identify a person or a place of interest, so that we're much more efficient with our time and we can save costs. It's a killer use case you just described.
Yeah, and you can imagine where, you could train a computer to recognize the heat signature of a human versus a deer,
exactly.
Pattern recognition, and you'd be able to weed out, before the human even sees it, you'd be able to weed out the non-humans in the forest just to focus on the human. And you might even be able to do that simply by temperature, if you think about it.
Yeah, look, I think everything, that's the beauty of machine learning, right? You build data sets, you round out edge cases, you get more efficient. It's something we're really, really big on here, and we continue to invest heavily into our ML, AI, and computer vision teams.
All right, Dan, thank you for joining us today. It was a pleasure to speak to you, and hopefully we'll have one answer or another eventually for whatever happened in New Jersey, and apparently still continues to happen.
John, thanks so much for having me. I love talking all things science with smart people like yourself, and I'm with you. I really hope that we get some resolution, we get some answers, and people can kind of return to life as normal.
Brave new world indeed in drones and drone technology, and Firestorm is the forefront of it, and I wish you guys well.
Thanks, John. Appreciate it.
Event Horizon and my channel are now available as a podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube memberships. Early ad-free episodes, bonus episodes, and sleep-focused content. Sign up now by clicking the links below to your platform of choice.